Hello and welcome to another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And I always say if you've listened, but I shouldn't assume you've been listening. If it's your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. I hope you like what you hear and I hope you come back. But if you've been listening, you may already know we're into May now. And I've kind of created the theme, and I don't always use themes, although April was an easy one. April was National Humor Month. So anyone who knows me knows that I had to focus on what's funny. And not just what's funny. If you listen, there were some pretty serious things that came out when I spoke with our female comedians, because as we know, a lot of times humor is used to kind of help us cope with pain and help us cope with things like that. So we talked about a lot of fun and funny stuff, but also some serious stuff in April with National Humor Month. And then we transitioned with the one comedian who we talked about a little bit of mental health. So it's a nice transition into May where I want to focus, on growth. And you heard me talk to Kristen Armstrong last week. She owns Peaches Greens, and we talked about her journey with her business and how she's part of the vendors at the farmers market. And that is a wonderful thing for community growth and for businesses and for people just to get out together. So continuing with that theme, and there are so many different ways, obviously, that we could go with growth, literal, figurative, all of that. And so today we're going to go more with the personal, the individual, the personal, the professional, the emotional, all that comes, that's part of us as individuals, as humans. We have a professional side, we have a personal side, we have so many different parts of us. And a lot of us are always trying to stretch and grow and just be better at what we do and just be better to ourselves. So there's so many ways we could talk about that. So today, my guest is an empowerment coach, and her name is Donna Nelson. And Donna and I met, I always like to say how I've met with different women. As you know, most of my guests are like 99% are women. I always joke that I allow the occasional token male to come and talk if what he has to say is important to women, like Robert Thomas with self-defense. Donna and I met at a networking event. I believe it was NEPA Networkers through our good friend Cheryl Kaiser. And Cheryl, you may remember from around St. Patty's Day, she talked about always reinventing herself, and she's gotten into stand-up comedy and the pipe band for St. Patrick's Day and the parade. And she was a major part of when I left Blue Cross, helping me. She was a mentor. She helped provide me with physical space for my office. So it's really great. What I think is wonderful is all these connections. Networking can be so valuable. You get out there, you meet someone, and then they connect you with someone, and you can help one another. And I think that's just great. So I would like to introduce and welcome my guest for this week, Donna Nelson. Hello and welcome, Donna.
Hello, Janine. I'm excited to be here. Of course, you know that.
Wonderful. Well, I was just saying before I hit record, Donna is looking so lovely. That's why I'm so glad posting to YouTube. And I know I shouldn't lead with that because women are so much more than that, but she just looks fantastic. So I have to say that. And you look like you're looking happy and you have a smile on your face. So I'm just so excited to hear your story and hear how you're empowering people, because that's such a big part of growth.
Yes. So, I mean, coaching has always been something that was super easy for me. It came very natural. Even as a young child, I was that one that others came to tell their deepest, darkest secrets. And it still fascinates me how I'll meet someone and in less than 5 minutes, they tell me these things they've never told anyone in their life. And I just have to wonder, what is this invisible sign that people feel like I am a safe space for them?
That could be a gift or a little bit of a responsibility, right?
Yeah, it's a gift for sure. And one that I never thought much of until I started working really on my own self-development. I was really lucky early on in my career that I worked in sales and in an industry that was, in the early 80s, immersed in all of these self-development gurus, some of which have passed on, and their legacies of teaching has lived on. And from that, it wasn't something that I was brought up with. Self-development was far, unless it was religious based, from how I was raised. And so over the last 30 some years, I've realized and really have evolved in how I've developed myself in growth, and now how I can help others do that. And that's how I really transitioned into my coaching business. And over time, I've moved from just kind of helping random anybody, everybody, to really knowing that I love working with business leaders and entrepreneurs who want to make an impact, who are leading kind of unfulfilled, overwhelmed lives, and how I can help them with kind of these foundational aspects for growth from within, so that the stuff that we want to do on the outside is so much more fulfilling and with ease. So it's kind of the story of how the short version.
Yeah. So do you want to, before we get into how how you're helping, what's one or two things that you would share, if you want to even just share one specific thing about how you have been able to grow, even like through this business? I'm sure helping others helps you, because I know, like, even when I do stand up, if people laugh, I feel good, not just for my ego, but I feel like a connection, like it feels good.
Sure, that's that emotional connection that we're always looking for, right? And emotions are a big part of what I'm able to help with, because sometimes our emotions are out of control, or we're suppressing our emotions. We just don't know how to, we don't know how to feel well. Because for many of us, feeling has not been a safe space our whole life. Either when your feelings are too big, we get squished down. And that was me. I have big energy. And that sometimes doesn't always come out, or had not always come out in the right ways, right? So then it was like, settle down, don't be too loud, act like a lady, like all of those things. And so one of the growth things for me, and this wasn't even until I was probably in my 40s, was to really connect to my authentic self. Like, what were those things that really were who I was at my core? And with that, I had to let go of a whole lot of beliefs and values that weren't even mine, And so through a lot of those exercises, I was able to better identify my own truth. And that was so liberating for me. And I had to let go of people. And, we can talk about what some of those things are that get in our way of growth, both personally. And then, of course, if we're not growing personally within, then we're not going to grow in the right way professionally. We'll choose careers that we were supposed to do instead of what aligned with us, and on and on. I know, I'm sure you see some of that at the university level too.
Yeah. And you mentioned, it was interesting, you said about our own values, got to let go of things. Do you think that part of that is how we grow up? And I knew you mentioned before, religion, for a lot of people is, and not to get into a conversation necessarily about religion, but, like self-development, these terms are all relatively somewhat new in the past, 10 to 15 years, self-care and, all that stuff. We didn't really like, I was born in 71. So growing up, I grew up in a Catholic household. And I mean, and it also could be your parents. It's not like, I went and I did what the nuns told me and I was a good girl and I did all that. But those, like you said, the beliefs are not necessarily ours. I know for myself, going to church, there was a time in my 30s when I said, why am I going? I was going because my parents went, and I was going because it was, I hate to, say it's not a real pretty word. It was a habit, you know what I mean? Like it was something I did every weekend, but I didn't feel that it helped necessarily to make me a better person or to make me a good person. And that's not to say anything judgment at all about what people practice or whatever, but I didn't like hearing that you had to be in that building for an hour to be a good person, when I felt that your time outside of that was so much more important in how you behave. So do you think that some of it, we get kind of stuck with how we're brought up and we don't know our own values, or it takes a while? I would ask, I guess.
Yes. And it's one of those, I have a program, it's a 30-day program that I do. It's very intensive, called Breakthrough to Wholeness. And one of the modules in that is this spiritual aspect of ourselves. And and the whole program is around looking at partly our beliefs, but our values, and then how our behaviors are attached to that, right? How we get caught up in the roles of life, right? Which you kind of opened with. And I was like, I think Janine was looking at my notes. But it's like, there's these two aspects of growth, right? There's the personal parts of us, the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, right? And then there's, and mentally, of course. And then there's these aspects of our life, that these domains, which are, say, our health, our career, our job, education, like our vocation stuff, right? Relationships, financially, socially. Those are the doing part. But the being and the real growth is the within part, right? Those, how are we growing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically? And those are the parts of us that we have to then start looking at, exactly what you said and exactly what I said too, around my faith-based upbringing. And why am I doing this? What is this doing for me? Does this even match who I am and who I've become in this journey over these years? And for me, it was a no. It wasn't a match any longer. Just as you said, why am I sitting here? Because somehow that's approval. Somehow that's the expectation of my family that makes me a good person, or the view in the community that I should be doing this because it's part of my community service and looking like a stand-up citizen. And so for me, I just said bullshit to all of that. And went, no, I am not fulfilled. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied living according to somebody else's measure. And those were the things that I started shifting within me and the way that I believed. And once I let go of that, it really helped me to not only feel more at ease and with peace with myself, because now I was being truer to myself, right? I mean, that's the essence of my work, is helping people get aligned with their own truth, because then we can make better decisions around, well, we know what we value then, right? So, yeah. So those were just, I'll just keep rambling on. So just shut me up at any point. But yeah, but those were some of the core things that I had to do to figure out, what are those changes that I need to make within me in each of these areas, aspects of myself, in order to feel fulfilled, because that's really what we all want out of life, right?
Yeah.
But many times, one of the mistakes that I see very often that holds people back from growth is that, well, I'll say the personal inner growth, is that they're focused on the external growth. And when we focus on what's the next degree, the next certification, the next title, the next corporate ladder step, the bigger house, the nicer neighborhood, more of the things, all these external validating things that, again, if you're not certain about your own inner knowing and your own person and who you are and what matters most to you, then you're going to get caught up in those things. And then we see it I see it super often in that keep working to that next financial level, right? Whether it's especially in the coaching industry, right? Oh, did I make 100,000? Did I make $1 million a year? Somebody else is making 5 million. That means I'm not good enough, and always stretching. But when we get there, we achieve that thing, we do that thing. We turn around and go, that was it. Like, now what? Because you did it for that validation of thinking that, well, if I grow this, or I do that, or I achieve that, then I'm going to feel like I've done something.
Yeah.
But you look back and that's not it. Grow inside to achieve what you want to do outside.
And I think there's probably, I don't want to say all, although I would say there's a great number of people who do that, at least to some degree, where it's like, okay, now what? And never, because it's never enough. Because I mean, I will say I've chosen all the fields that don't pay. So I'm not saying 1 million, 5 million. I'm like, oh, did I make 20 grand? I choose fields that don't pay, but that feeling of fulfillment, it's still true in the sense of, that's why I often I feel great. I love the feeling after I perform and I've connected with people and I've made them laugh, or after I go for a run, because I don't want to. It's not like I'm eager to do it, but I know the benefits of it. And when I'm out there running, I think of ideas for my stand up and for marketing, and it feels great when I'm finished. But all those things, and it's not, I know it's not the same thing as it's not money. It's these things I find valuable, but when it comes to the connection, it's not just connection like with the performance for me, it's also validation, because I want to go away going, oh, they laughed, so they must like me. Or when I do a laughter yoga presentation, ooh, that woman in the corner wasn't really smiling the whole time. She didn't like me. And, and I'll do one if it goes well. Like I had a really good week last week, and then I come home and I'm like, I'm exhausted from the emotional investment. And then I'm like, all right, now what? And I don't necessarily feel better about myself. So I know my work, I have to work on. I enjoy doing that and I still want to keep doing it, but putting it into perspective for myself, because it's exhausting and then it doesn't still seem like enough. So what is enough? And I'm sure a lot of us have it in our own way, in our own lives, that they need to talk to people like you so that they can help themselves get this straight.
Yes, because some of the things that you're describing is, and that's what we are always fighting for, right? When can I get that next endorphin rush? And so the things that you just said, right? Running, it gives me a burst of that endorphins. I feel better. I'm fired up. But then when it wears off, it's like, okay, now what? What's the next thing I can do, right? To get another burst of that endorphin rush. And because you're a comedian, it's easy, right? So you just have to come up with a great punchline, or connect meaningful way with your audience. And that gives you that burst. And then when you get to go present that epiphany that you had while you were running that you get to share in your next show, you're like, yes, it worked, right? Like you knew it was there. And so then you get that burst again. And so the secret, I think, to the growth is, how do I produce that with myself without getting that externally? I'm telling you, that is the magic right there, is how am I good with me regardless of the external?
Yeah.
And Janine, I think the biggest thing for me where I made that leap, it was literally a leap for me, because I've been in self-development for a long time and seen a lot of different theories and practices and ways of doing it and all of that. The biggest leap for me, though, was after my son Lucas, who passed away at 3. After he passed away, there were so many things that I was angry about, that I was disappointed about how things went. I mean, there was just such a range of things that I was not happy with. And what that allowed me to do was reevaluate, right? What really matters most. And I think about any of us who have someone that we care about that we lose in our life, whether it's a relationship that's through separation, divorce, whatever, or the passing of someone. There's always that grieving process of the loss, right? And reevaluating. We see it all the time in divorce, right? There's a divorce, and now all of a sudden, these two people who couldn't get along with each other, they go out and they reinvent themselves. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it? It's like, well, if you had done that in the marriage.
True, right?
Things would have worked out a little differently. But then maybe not. Coming from a divorced person, yeah, it would have worked out. So, but it gives us this opportunity to now grow again, right? To regenerate some aspects of ourselves. And so when my son Lucas passed away, it had me go back to kind of circling back to what we said earlier about what aspects of myself, why am I hating myself and suffering, trying to hate other people or hate situations, and all that was suffering was me. And so the big transition for me was to be able to let go of those things, and know that they were not things that I really had any control over, and not holding hostage others for my emotions, and how I was feeling, because nobody even knew it but me. I was angry but I was in my own little world of anger. And so working through that was a big growth for me. So part of growth in the message of how do we grow, it's looking at what do we have to let go, right? What are the people, places, and things that we need to prune away so that we can continue to grow, knowing and trusting within ourselves that I don't need those people's validation. I don't need to go to those places any longer to feel supported, significant, edified, whatever, when they
Yeah.
really weren't contributing to my growth anyway.
Hmm. Well,
Mm.
I do want to say, and I don't know you super well. I know this is probably a long time ago, but I want to say I'm really sorry for your loss of your son, because I can't even imagine the pain that you experienced. So I want to, and I thank you for sharing that. I don't want to get off track, but I do want to mention, because I think it's an appropriate time to mention for people to know what great work you're doing. You did start a nonprofit for moms, and I'll put that information in, and I actually want to have you back to talk about that, but you do Adopt a Single Mom, which is a nonprofit. So you, to me, I see you as a person then who's channeled what you've gone through, and you're doing something fantastic. You're helping single moms in the community in northeastern Pennsylvania to help them have a better life. So I just want to say thank you for that work you're doing, and I think people need to check that out. It's just a wonderful organization. So thank you for that, Donna.
Yeah, thanks.
So, as far as the coaching goes, let me ask you this, and I want to ask you about, you mentioned entrepreneurs and how they're overwhelmed and all that, and I can just imagine a lot of stress involved in that. But I have to ask, because I kind of say this lighthearted, tongue in cheek, and I don't mean any offense, but do you find that there's a lot of people in coaching? It feels like a lot of people are getting into coaching these days. And and I'm not asking you to judge, but like, would you say there's different types of coaching needed, and how does yours, how would you, I guess, define or describe yours? Because there is a lot. I mean, I know there's health and wellness coaching and all kind. It just seems like you see the word coach a lot. So how do people know, well, what is right for me? What would help me really find my best self, or work on myself, whatever it is they're looking for?
Yeah, it's such a good question because the coaching industry has evolved so much. And that's a really good thing, because it used to be like you were either a health and wellness coach, or you were an executive coach, or you were a life coach. Like, just to take those three categories, and there's, 1,000 others, right? But those are three big categories. And so if you wanted a coach, well, are you looking for a life coach, someone to help you kind of kind of globally in your personal life? Well, then hire a life coach. And the thing that's great about what some would say is a saturation of coaching is that it has forced specialties, just like it did in medicine, right? So we no longer go to the GP for everything. You go when you have the sniffles, or need to get your annual checkup, and then anything that pops up, they send you off to the next guy, right? Or next gal, you know what I'm saying, generally. So so it's the same thing in coaching, and which is why I think it's super important to understand, what are your goals? Like, what is it you want to achieve? Where do you want to grow? Where do you need the most support, so that you can then define what type of coach, or what kind of coaching you want help with. So with that, coaching has become very niched. And so that's why you need to ask that question. It's not good enough to just go to a life coach. And yeah, maybe they're going to be able to help you kind of globally with some things, but most of us need much more kind of narrowed down a specific area of our life, whether it's relationships, right? And relationships, again, are big. I had someone say to me recently, I was talking about my coaching business, and they were like, wait, you work with people on their relationships in your coaching? And I thought, well, what the hell is there without relationships? Like, everything in our life is relationships, right? Pick something. When you're dealing with humans, like, it's that whole human element. Yes, because everyone that comes to me, no matter what they come, their big problem is that they want to solve, right? Whether it's um, wanting to solve problems better, or, whatever, being more strategic, any of those things. There's always this element of there's somebody in their life that is causing a problem. But mostly it's the relationship with themselves that's the problem. So we always start with this foundational aspect of you have to get good with the relationship with yourself and understanding what we talked about, right? Those spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, mental, I forget what I just listed there, aspects. And then once we identify the aspects of what you value in each of those areas, then how do those show up in these other domains in your life? And where's the weakness? Where's the gap? So it's funny, I say this a lot with the Dr. Single Mom too, like, what are the gaps? How do we fill the gaps? But that's all I do is help people close the gap by filling in whatever those areas are that they need. So, but it's all, my whole aspect of coaching is the person individual first, and then how do we fill the gaps in those other areas of their life? So finding a coach that, if you need executive coaching, well, do you need strategic business planning? Or do you need to know how to work better with your team, right? So those are some questions that need to be asked as far as coaching goes. Did that answer your question? Because I feel like
no, definitely. And I like the comparison. I love comparisons because they help people go, okay, I see it now, or I get it. The comparison of the GP and now the specialist. And that makes perfect sense because I mean, back in the day where you'd have like, doctor's visits, but back in the 1800s, one doctor in the village or whatever. And now, we have podiatrists, we have dermatologists, and it makes sense, right? So that makes perfect sense what you're saying. So there are coaches who are pretty much specializing in a variety of things, and that's good. And that's good because they're getting narrower. And again, depending on what, like you said, what are your goals? And then that will help you decide who it is that you need coaching from. And you're, just so people understand too, a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but I've heard people kind of scoff, oh, coaches, whatever. But this is something I think for people to look at too. Not every coach is the same as far as what different, some are associated with different organizations, different kinds of training. So all of that is different, right? Maybe some people have, a certain educational background and some are studying coaching from certain organization. That can vary. And that's something people can kind of read up on when they're examining or investigating what coach they want to talk to.
Yes, it's true. But at the same time, because this is part of my what I see oftentimes mistakes made that hold people back from growth. And so just because somebody has a stacked resume doesn't make them skilled. And it also doesn't make them the right coach for you. So while on the surface, you may pop on someone's website and you go, oh, wow, they have the same business background that I do. Oh, and look at all of these certifications. And oh, look at these publications they've been in. And what I've found, and this is part of the challenge, even that I work with like other coaches and in the service-based industry, is that when someone comes to me because they're stuck, they know they have a skill, they know they have a message, and they just find themselves not stepping up big, or they've reached a plateau in, say, in their marketing or in their income level. And they can't figure out why they're not taking that step forward, because, and they keep saying, yeah, I just took this other course and maybe I just need to take this certification. And maybe, and it's like, no, it's not the external stuff that's the problem. It's the internal. It's the emotional triggers that every time you think you want to be bigger, there's, I'll be nice and not drop the F-bomb on your show. But it's like, there's these things that go on in our mind that are like from our childhood, right? Like, don't be too loud, don't be too big, or, nobody ever made that much money in our family, or nobody's going to pay you that much, or that you're expecting too much, or, these stories that go on in our head. Well, it doesn't matter how much you learn. So when you're reading, my point is that when you're reading someone's curriculum vitae or whatever they have on their website, follow them, get on their Instagram, or get on their their free trainings, or small paid trainings, or their YouTube channel. Listen to them. Do they sound like they have something of value that's going to solve the problem that you want to solve? And I say that because it was a lesson that I needed to learn early on in my coaching, all of that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds, and it makes perfect sense. You're right, because anyone can have, credentials, and I shouldn't say anyone, but I mean, obviously it takes a certain mind to complete courses and all that, but that doesn't make them better at X, Y, or Z. You're absolutely right. And so it's good advice to check out, like, see what they're saying. What are their YouTube videos they've created? Is it resonating with you? Do you kind of think that they have something for you? That makes perfect sense. And I love that what you said, about, like, I mean, it really does come down to us, the narrative, because I'm one of those people that I know, I know I hold myself back again, because of what we've I wasn't told that I'm too loud, but I was also kind of quiet growing up. Well, I was loud at the house, but outside in the classroom, I did well in school. I had good grades, but I was the kid in Catholic school that they'd have stand in front and watch the rest of the class. Okay. I was that nerd because I wanted to be a good girl. And even now, like, with setting my pricing, oh, I can't charge that. Who? Because somebody said I can't, and so I totally get that. And I find, and I don't know, I'll ask you what you find, but I see when I'm talking to other women, I find that to be more of a challenge, or I don't know what you want to say, disease, I'll even say, with women than with men. And this isn't about bashing, but I'm from what I've seen, men can be more full of bravado and don't mind saying, yeah, I never did it before in my life, but this is what I'm charging. Whereas women are like, well, gee, I've done it for 10 years, but I don't know if I could charge that. I see it more commonly in women, where we just don't believe in ourselves and we hold ourselves back. Do you see that with your coaching a lot?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that kind of stinks. I mean, it kind of stinks. I would like to believe, though, the younger generation, at least from what I'm seeing, like, that are in college now, are not going to be like that. I could be wrong, but I feel like they're bolder, and they're like, yeah, so what if you say this? Like, I feel like they don't have the restraints, or constraints, excuse me, that we've had. Some of us have had. I don't know if you've dealt with many. Do you ever do any coaching on, like, a collegiate level, or anything like that?
Yeah, I hired someone to help me in my coaching business not that long ago. And someone actually that had reached a college student that reached out to me on LinkedIn. And she was amazing in her skills, and a resume that any professional company looking to hire someone with her skill sets would be like, she has been incredible, like what she's accomplished in her educational career. And but the problem was what she believed about herself.
Hmm.
And so some of the things that I had her doing, she would get stuck because she would be too much in her head trying to be a perfectionist and worrying about judgment. And so while she had the skill, when it really came out to things being put out there, or giving it to someone else to look at that could possibly judge her in her own mind, it kept her stuck, which obviously affected her performance and got her fired. So, I mean, you can only do so much, right? Like, but that's why I say that all my work is the foundation of what I do, is help with those inner aspects of ourselves, because we can learn all the stuff, have all the skills, and be terrified to put ourselves out there, or terrified to trust ourselves to move to the next level, or to take a risk, or to be seen. And that's the stuff that holds us back from growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's funny. I always think, I almost wish some days that I say this a lot to myself and my friends. I wish I was almost like ignorant, because I feel like that old saying, ignorance is bliss, because one of my problems is not that I lack self-awareness. I'm brimming with self-awareness. It's just, but it's hard to do the part we're talking about. It's like, oh, wow, I know I'm a procrastinator. I know I'm not organized person. I know this, I know that. But sometimes, and you said earlier you help entrepreneurs, and you mentioned the word overwhelmed, and I think that's a big part. I know I feel that myself, but I feel like a lot of people do, especially since the pandemic. And I hate to keep referring to it. I love the day when we won't even have to say it, because it's been like for 2 years now. Oh, since the pandemic, since the supply chains and prices and everything's pandemic. But I mean, it is real, and I mean, it has changed and impacted our lives in a great way. But so how do, I guess I could say, you could almost say that everyone could use some coaching, because I feel like everybody's overwhelmed to some degree, aren't they? I mean, that for me, I see that and I'm like, what do I start with first? And that's kind of where I get stuck a lot.
Yeah. So it's a really great thing. And this right here, I think is going to help everybody because it's true. So yes, I feel the same way you do. When are we going to be able to stop adding to everything that we say with the precursor of before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
So we can make a decision to skip it and just say accept that. See, the challenge is accepting, right? See, we're still a little bit in denial. We're still a little bit angry about it. Like, I'm just saying kind of like societally, right? Not you and I maybe necessarily. But like we're still connected to the old. So
Mhm.
until we accept the fact that here's where we're at and what are we going to do about it? So now we have a choice. I can adapt. I can be agile. I'm trying not to use the word pivot, which has been so overused since the pandemic.
A hot word. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we have to accept, adapt, and be agile. So adapting is, what is my new lifestyle? What is my new way of being? And we see it, the hybrid model. We are not going back to the old. Many brick and mortar things are gone. They're going to be gone forever. Can I accept that? How do I have to adapt? Now I have to order things online. I mean, even cars, I just heard this past week, like we're going into a time where you're going to be ordering your car online. You're not going to test drive a car, so these are very fast moving things that are happening right now. So we're no longer at a speed that many of us have already found difficult to keep up with. Things are moving exponentially faster now. And for us to get a handle on our beingness, so that we can handle the capacity of the speed. And so one of the steps to that is clarity. The reason that we get into procrastination, overwhelm, confusion is lack of clarity. Where am I? Where am I going? Who am I? Who do I need to be to get there? Right. And then again, there's the gaps between those, right? So getting clarity will minimize the overwhelm. The second thing is what we said already, which is the letting go. So how about stop saying yes to everything? Because things are moving so fast and we're still making this mental and emotional adjustment to the new way of things are, saying yes to everything is just not a fair thing to do to you. So what are those people, places, things that you need to say no to? And then letting those go. And it doesn't have to be let go forever. It has to be let go right now until I get myself centered and recalibrated. And then maybe you can start adding some things back in, or then you realize, wow, why I didn't do that years ago. And then the other one is boundaries on our time and our energy, but also our mindset. What we put in, the doom scrolling on social media, listening to the negative Nellies, at the hangout or wherever, having the news playing in the background every morning, getting ready for work or whatever. So protecting our mindset is going to also minimize the overwhelm and the stress, because we often are listening to people and things in the background that have nothing to do with us. Like, I'm concerned about world issues, but the truth is, as you know, Janine, there's a lot to do right here in northeastern Pennsylvania. In
Right.
Pennsylvania, like, geez, if we could just fix all the problems right here, then our energy and we as individuals can make a bigger impact in the world. But
Yeah.
diluting our energy, and that's what we're doing. We're diluting our energy by focusing on things outside of the things that are most important, really most important to us, right?
Yeah.
So having boundaries around those three things, and then creating white space. This is, again, one of the biggest mistakes that I see in business leaders, is not having enough white space. And it's become more of a problem, yes, since the pandemic, because we're having more meetings, we're having to write new policies, do things differently. And again, most of us are trying to make an impact at the community level too. So we're getting more involved in committees, and where can we as an organization make an impact? And it becomes a lot. So one of the things that I've learned to do is to create a lot of white space. So between this podcast and my next meeting, there's white space. I don't go up to the wire and hop from one thing and then tell my brain that it should be able to shift on a dime like that. It's just an unreasonable thing. We're sitting here having, a nice, fun, creative conversation. Then I'm going to jump into a very strategic, meeting. That's madness. But I see business leaders do that all the time, or not make enough space for that creativity time, to have some downtime, to let your body regroup, do some breathing, take a 5-minute walk, think about what's next, but also integrate the experience from where you just came from, so that your brain has a minute to integrate some memory. So you're not like, oh, I can't remember, all this stuff's rolling together.
Yeah, you just said a lot. But a couple of things I wanted to just connect to. It's interesting you said the adaptability and the agility. I do marketing for TechBridge, the TechBridge organization, and I had the good fortune I was able to write a blog post for their website back in January. And my background, I have comedy and improvisation, but improvisation, it's something that's being utilized across the country in corporations, because of the principle it's based on yes and not yes as in saying yes to everything, like you're saying that's not a good idea, but yes as in acceptance, as you mentioned, acceptance. And the blog that I wrote back in January kind of covered kind of what you were saying about the people who did best, or I should say, and by did best, I mean maybe we're feeling a little bit better about be stressing out as much, are the people who were able to yes and things a little bit better, like instead of denial, or instead of oh no, I don't want to live like this. After you get over it, like I said, it's okay to be a human emotions. You can have a fit, you can drink too much wine, you could curse, you could throw yourself on the floor and have a tantrum, but you can't do that continuously. You've got to say, okay, this is what we've got. It's not going away. And now how do I have to change? And then what can I change, or what can I contribute to move forward, which is what improv is based in. And also about how things are just going to have to go away. I mean, I know it's always unfortunate, like a lot of, businesses that have had to go out of business. And, I've had these conversations, and I always say I would never put them out on social media because people would be mad at me. But like some of the restaurants, if some of the businesses weren't doing well before the pandemic, this certainly didn't help. So maybe it's a time to go, guess what? Maybe I wasn't meant to be a restaurateur. You know what I mean? It's like some things had to go away, and we're, unfortunate, but maybe if you take time, like you say, the white space, figure out maybe that's not what was best for you anyway, or maybe you weren't really happy because you were always stressing to keep the business afloat. So it is a good time to kind of reflect and recalibrate and look at what's next. But so in closing, because we have a few minutes and I want to wrap up, that's like a lot of people, like we said, a lot of people are overwhelmed. So they should follow what you're saying about the clarity, and about like taking a look at what people, maybe it's okay to change your life situation, right? Maybe you can't see the same people anymore, and maybe they're not positive for you anymore. So I guess the question I'd ask is, so is it where we could start at least with the white space, maybe give ourselves that time when we can kind of reflect and start to think about what our goals are, get clarity. If a person in our life, after we hang up the phone with them or whatever, we feel like, wow, I feel crappy or I feel stressed every time I talk to that person. Maybe we should kind of remove ourselves from them or that situation. And these are, I guess, maybe things we could start with, would you say?
That was one of the first things that I started with, is exactly that assessment. Like, wow, that conversation, I'll just say I had in the past some friends that would have like hour-long conversations. But then when I hung up and I went, I just spent an hour of my life literally for nothing. Like, what was gained out of this? What better could I have been doing that aligned more with who I want to become and what I want to be doing? And a lot of that those conversations often were just what you said, like, negative or bitching or complaining and all of that. And it's like, wow. And so I just learned to like start giving more space to those relationships. So instead of us talking every week or every day, like some do with those kind of people in their lives, right? Maybe like, I just have a lot going on right now. I'll catch up with you another time. And eventually what I found is that I didn't have to so much have the hard conversation of like, listen, you're just bad for me, my energy, they would just go away on their own. It's amazing how they just go away on their own because they find someone else that will listen to them. But when it's close family, or your best friend for 50 years, it might be a little bit more difficult. But it's okay to say, you know what, I'm just working on some stuff with myself right now. I just need space.
Yeah. And it all does, like you said, it all starts with us. So, when I do my laughter yoga, one of the exercises we do this laughter, like life is turbulent, kind of like turbulence on a plane. And like on a plane, the mask would fall down to take a deep breath and it's full of laughing gas. But I always reference what the flight attendants say, right? They say, put your mask on first before assisting a young child or someone who needs help. And I say, that's what we kind of need to do when we make these choices, whether it's to laugh or go for a walk or meditate. We need to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, we can't be that person we are, or we see ourselves as taking care of other people. We just can't. We'll be depleted.
Exactly right. And what good is that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, how has that really helped anybody else? What are we teaching them? This is again another one of those things that is common to women, right?
Yeah.
Deplete yourself, keep giving, 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 giving. And it's just not a message that we need to send as leaders of our community. And it's not something that we want to perpetuate for the women that we care about in our lives and the girls.
Yeah. And there are still people, I would say, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I find it more in men who, I would say maybe it's more of an old school notion, who feel like you've got to pack your day and be willing to work. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be available all the time and accessible and do all this. I don't believe in that. I mean, I'm not, I just feel like you have to give yourself, like we talked before about boundaries, you have to allow yourself time when you are not accessible for business or whatever, because it's just too much, I think, at a certain point.
It is too much because it's a detriment to our overall well-being.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately a detriment to our business and our community, because when we get sick, and when we're not making good business decisions because we're overwhelmed and too rushed and there was no white space to think clearly, or to plan appropriately, then it suffers. So yeah, it's not good. So it's more about, one of my pet peeves is because a little bit about my life and things that I have going on, and it's when people say, oh, you're just so busy, and it's like, it's not that I'm not busy. I'm busy doing things that I love. I keep my calendar full. And that calendar full might be me going for an hour walk. That might be me taking the weekend off and going somewhere. Yep, my calendar is full. but I like to call it optimizing life. It's not about being busy. I don't need to be busy. I'm doing things that are purposeful, that are intentional, that are serving me, but my higher good for being in existence on this earth. So, yeah, so let's start looking at ourselves as, how am I optimizing my life, as opposed to adapting the hustle mindset.
That is I think that's a great place for us to wrap up, because I think that is something we really need to hear, that message, because, and that could be a whole other podcast about the whole hustle culture. And it's like, yeah, you have to be doing this if you're going to, it's like, no, 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 I don't think we all have to be doing that. But I love what you're saying about being, purposeful, intentional, and optimizing our lives. I think that's a great place to close. And I would like to have you back another time. We'll talk about your nonprofit, Adopt a Single Mom Project, because I think that would be great, especially when it's around a time when it could really be, beneficial for something that you've got going on there that's timely. But before we wrap up, I do want to give you an opportunity. Where would you like people to contact you if they're interested in coaching, or if they just want to see or learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I have I think all of my stuff is under Donna Nelson. So my website is donnanelson.us. So if someone wants to book an appointment with me to talk about opportunities for coaching, they can do that on my website. And also that's where they can get on the wait list for my next Breakthrough to Wholeness program, that 30-day program that I mentioned earlier. And on my YouTube channel, and which is under Donna Nelson, and I dozens and dozens of training videos on there, and on my Facebook page as well. Donna Nelson, I think it's Donna Nelson, Holistic Empowerment Coach on Facebook.
Okay. All right. And I will put that in the notes for the podcast and when I promote this, so that people can find you, and I'll tag you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Donna. This has been a fun conversation, an important conversation, and I think one that's really relevant to pretty much everybody's life right now, that they could learn a few things from. So I want to thank you for that, and thank you for what you shared, which are very valuable tips.
Thank you for the invite. It's been awesome.
So, in closing, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll continue to listen every week. As I said, I really do focus on having women as guests, not just locally. I'm here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, so Northeast PA, but I've had guests from New York, from Pittsburgh, so anywhere and all over. So, if you are doing something yourself that you would like to share or talk about, or if you have a friend that you want to, just message me, funnywinegirl.com, funnywinegirl Janine on Instagram or Facebook, because I love to empower others through the empowered women who are doing fantastic things. You can learn from their stories, gain some insights, some information, and hopefully some laughs along the way. So I hope you'll return. And thank you so much for listening. We'll continue with the theme of growth throughout the month of May. And again, if you like the podcast, remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. And if you don't like it, remember to tell your goldfish or message me privately. But I hope you did enjoy it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.